This is a classic road thriller movie, Joyride. The storyline is very creative with a tight plot and natural transitions. The story develops through a series of jokes, using a tense and terrifying atmosphere to shape the mysterious image of the villain. The story takes place during a summer vacation. The protagonist, Lewis, buys a used car to go on a romantic trip and pick up his crush, Vena. However, shortly after Lewis sets off, he receives a call at a gas station informing him that his brother has been arrested for drunken, disorderly conduct and needs Lewis to bail him out. Helplessly, he changes his route and goes to pick up his long-lost brother. Soon, he arrives at the police station. After 5 years apart, Fuller sees Lewis and can't help but exclaim that his younger brother is no longer a boy and has grown taller than him. Thus, Lewis takes Fuller along on his journey to pick up Vena. At a service area, Fuller takes the opportunity to install a CB radio in the car while Lewis is away. Lewis doesn't say much about it, thinking it could at least provide entertainment during the long trip. After everything is set, they continue driving, using the radio to chat with people around them. This becomes their only source of fun. Soon, a voice responds to them. Fuller decides to make Lewis impersonate a woman's voice to tease the other party.
This is Candy Cane. I've been looking for you all day.
Lewis initially refuses, but under Fuller's repeated urging, he picks up the radio.
Candy Cane, come on.
I knew it! These guys are so horny!
To their surprise, someone actually responds. Hearing this, their interest is immediately piqued. Fuller encourages Lewis to continue luring the other party. Lewis asks for the person's name, and the other party replies, calling himself Rusty Nail. Lewis goes even further with provocative words, making their conversation increasingly suggestive.
And if I were there, Rusty Nail, you know what I'd do?
Tell me.
Awesome!
I'd make you feel good.
It is obvious that Rusty Nail has fallen for their trick. Fuller and Lewis find it increasingly amusing. As the signal cuts off, the prank comes to an end. They still think it's just an ordinary joke. Night falls, and they arrive at a motel for the night. Fuller heads to the motel reception, where an irritable old man is angrily ranting. Fuller's arrival immediately annoys the old man. On his way out, the old man deliberately bumps into Fuller. This makes Fuller furious, and he storms back to the car. At that moment, the radio signal returns to normal. The familiar voice comes through once again. Hearing Rusty Nail's voice over the radio, Fuller comes up with a new idea. He tells Lewis to pretend to be a woman again and lure Rusty Nail to room 17 of the motel. Still angry about the old man's rude behavior, he gives Rusty Nail the old man's room number instead. Lewis initially wants to refuse. However, Fuller starts shouting wildly, forcing Lewis to comply. Lewis gives Rusty Nail the motel's location and sets up a meeting for late at night. He even tells Rusty Nail to bring a bottle of pink champagne. When Rusty Nail agrees, they are both thrilled. Midnight arrives quickly. A large truck pulls up outside the motel. Rusty Nail appears on time and heads straight to the designated room. Fuller and Lewis, excited, press their ears against the wall, eager to hear what happens. But after a few heavy thuds, the room falls silent. They can only hear faint breathing. Lewis realizes something is wrong. He thinks something bad might have happened. He rushes to the bed and calls the motel reception, reporting the strange noises. After checking, the receptionist assures Lewis that everything seems normal. However, Fuller remains uneasy. He quickly locks the room's safety latch. The two spend the rest of the night feeling restless. At dawn, the police find them and inform them that something did happen last night. The old man in the adjacent room was assaulted. Since the motel staff saw Fuller arguing with the old man, he naturally becomes a suspect. However, without solid evidence, the police can't do anything. Fuller and Lewis go to the hospital and see the injured old man. His entire lower jaw has been ripped off. The horrifying sight makes their eyes widen in shock. Seeing this, they go to the police station and confess everything to Sheriff Ritter. They tell him the details of their prank. Sheriff Ritter warns them to stop messing around. He tells them that Rusty Nail might be a truck driver, and if they continue, they could end up just like the old man. After a scolding, he lets them go. Back at the motel, after packing their luggage, they hit the road again. Night fell quickly, and Lewis turned on the CB radio, wanting to check if there were any road inspections ahead. Unexpectedly, Rusty Nail's voice came through again, repeatedly calling out to Lewis. Hearing his persistent tone, Lewis decided to tell the truth. He was actually a man, and the whole thing had just been a joke. Rusty Nail was silent for a moment, then demanded an apology from Fuller and Lewis. But Fuller grabbed the radio and started insulting Rusty Nail, taunting him with provocative words. Rusty Nail remained calm and didn't seem angry. Instead, he left a chilling remark that made Fuller and Lewis break into a cold sweat.
You're no black sheep. You really ought to get that fixed.
Get what fixed?
Your tail light.
The two of them were stunned. Fuller slowly turned his head to look behind them, and sure enough, there was a big truck following them. Lewis recognized the truck. It had been tailing them since the motel. Fuller insisted that as long as they kept driving, they would be fine. But then Lewis told him that they were almost out of gas. To shake off the truck, Lewis suddenly swerved, taking a sharp turn onto a side road, successfully losing the truck. They soon arrived at a gas station. Fuller stayed outside to refuel, while Lewis went inside to pay. Strangely, the store was empty. After looking around, Lewis picked up a phone and dialed the local police station. Just then, a refrigerated truck pulled into the gas station. The driver got out, holding a baseball bat, and walked toward the store. From a distance, Fuller saw this and assumed the man was Rusty Nail. Terrified, he didn't dare speak and instead frantically gestured to Lewis, warning him of the danger and signaling him to leave immediately. Lewis followed Fuller's gaze and saw a man approaching with a friendly expression. Panicked, he hung up the phone. At that moment, the store clerk finally appeared. Lewis rushed to the counter, handed over his fuel card, and left the store without looking back. He stepped on the gas and sped away from the station. But they hadn't driven far before the truck driver from earlier began chasing them. In his panic, Lewis failed to notice a road sign and accidentally drove into a dead end. The truck kept coming after them relentlessly. Lewis finally stopped near a fence. As the driver slowly approached, Lewis and Fuller's hearts pounded in fear. With no other option, Fuller mimed holding a gun, trying to scare the driver away.
And I got a MasterCard.
It turned out that Lewis, in his tense state earlier, had forgotten to take his fuel card. The driver wasn't a threat. He was just trying to return the card to them. Before they could even breathe a sigh of relief, the familiar big truck appeared once again. Rusty Nail had arrived. The truck plowed straight into the refrigerated truck, splitting it in two before charging toward Lewis and Fuller. Seeing this, they jumped into their car, smashed through the fence, and sped away. A high-speed chase ensued. Lewis executed a perfect drift, managing to shake off the truck. But they didn't get far before their car crashed into a large tree. The impact was severe, and the engine wouldn't start. Before they could react, the big truck was right behind them, closing in fast. It showed no sign of stopping. Their car was about to be flipped over. In desperation, Fuller grabbed the radio and pleaded with Rusty Nail. He begged for mercy, insisting that they were only joking and didn't mean any harm. Rusty Nail listened to Fuller's apology and then stopped.
Well, I was just playing with you, man.
The massive truck slowly reversed and disappeared into the darkness. At dawn, after getting their car repaired, Lewis and Fuller hit the road once again. Fuller knew the CB radio was the root of all their troubles. He ripped it out and threw it out of the window. He didn't want to hear another sound from it. After a long journey, they finally arrived at Vena's house. After packing their bags, they were ready to continue their vacation. Fuller's eyes were glued to Vena when he saw her. Before they left, Vena's best friend came to say goodbye. Vena wanted her to join the trip, but she had to go home and declined without hesitation. As night fell, they checked into another motel. Lewis, drunk, passed out on the bed, while Fuller took the opportunity to join Vena in her room for more drinks. Suddenly, the phone beside Lewis's bed rang. When he picked up, the voice on the other end shattered his peaceful sleep.
No, I thought you said there was no girl.
What? Lewis panicked. He realized Rusty Nail was still following them. Even worse, Rusty Nail knew about Vena. He rushed to Vena's room without a second thought. At that moment, he had no time to wonder why Fuller was there. He told Vena and Fuller what was happening and urged them to leave immediately. They sprinted to the car and sped away from the motel. On the way, Fuller and Lewis told Vena everything that had happened. Suddenly, Fuller slammed on the brakes. He had noticed something earlier, a road sign with a message from Rusty Nail. The sign instructed them to check their trunk. Lewis didn't believe it at first, but Fuller pointed ahead to another road sign. It had Lewis's name written on it. Horrified, they got out of the car and hesitantly opened the trunk. Inside was the CB radio Fuller had thrown away earlier. Fuller decided to reinstall it. He wanted to ask Rusty Nail what he wanted before calling the police. It wasn't long before the radio crackled to life. Rusty Nail greeted them, but along with his voice, they heard a woman's screams. Vena instantly recognized the voice. It was her best friend, Charlotte. Rusty Nail threatened them. He ordered them to wait at a truck stop on the interstate. If they dared to call the police, someone would die that night. They quickly arrived at the truck stop. The radio came to life again. Rusty Nail gave them another demand. Lewis and Fuller had to go into a burger joint and each order 6 hamburgers. But there was a catch. They had to do it completely naked. To keep Charlotte safe, they had no choice but to comply. After they left, Rusty Nail spoke with a meaningful tone.
Now they know what it feels like to be the brunt of the joke.
After completing the humiliating task, they continued their journey. Rusty Nail then ordered them to drive into a cornfield and walk 100 meters forward after getting out of the car. But halfway through, the familiar big truck appeared again, charging straight at them. Panicked, they ran into the cornfield, but the truck showed no intention of letting them go, relentlessly pursuing them. As the truck got dangerously close, Lewis told them to get down and hide in a ditch. They successfully avoided the impact. Taking advantage of the moment, they split up and hid deeper in the cornfield. Rusty Nail turned on his high beams, pinpointed their location, and took Vena captive. As the truck drove away, Lewis and Fuller realized that Vena had been kidnapped, and their car had been set on fire, making it useless. Rusty Nail contacted them via CB radio, instructing them to be at room 17 of the next town's motel by midnight, without being even a minute late. He also specifically told Lewis to bring a bottle of pink champagne. As soon as Rusty Nail finished speaking, Lewis's car exploded, throwing both him and Fuller to the ground. Now, with their only means of transportation destroyed and the distance too far, they had no chance of making it in time. Fortunately, Fuller, with his mechanical skills, hot-wired a pickup truck and sped toward the destination. Rusty Nail had prepared a deadly surprise. Vena was tied to a chair with duct tape over her mouth. A shotgun was aimed at her, with the trigger connected to the door. If anyone entered, the gun would fire instantly. To make matters worse, Rusty Nail called the police, reporting a murder at the motel. After setting his trap, he patiently waited for his prey to arrive. Lewis and Fuller reached room 17 and were about to open the door. Inside, Vena's eyes widened in terror, but the two outside had no idea what was happening inside.
Coming in. Hey, coming in. Coming in.
When they opened the door, they didn't see Vena anywhere. Just then the phone rang. Rusty Nail told them he was actually in the next room. He invited them to press their ears against the wall and listen. His reason? He wanted to toy with them, just as they had toyed with him. Lewis told Fuller to check through the window. But the curtains were tightly drawn, so he went around to the back window instead. As he peered inside, the window suddenly shattered. Rusty Nail yanked him into the room, covering his mouth. Hearing the noise, Lewis rushed to the door. In a life-or-death moment, Fuller managed to break free, tumbling onto a wooden board. He immediately shouted for Lewis, warning him not to open the door. Lewis froze in his tracks. Meanwhile, Fuller realized that a steel rod had pierced his leg. Rusty Nail stepped outside, stomping on his injured leg, worsening the wound. His screams of agony caught Lewis's attention. Lewis ran to the back and saw Rusty Nail driving off in his truck. Fuller was left hanging from the fence, barely conscious. At that moment, a swarm of police officers arrived. They discovered that the motel staff had been murdered. The officers began searching every room, but that posed a huge risk. If an unsuspecting officer opened the wrong door, Vena would be killed instantly. Meanwhile, Lewis, trying to help Fuller, overheard the police and realized Vena was in immediate danger. Without hesitation, he left Fuller and rushed to rescue Vena. Just as the police opened the door, Lewis tackled Vena, avoiding the fatal shot. The officers, startled, pointed their guns at Lewis. But Fuller was in grave danger. Rusty Nail had turned his truck around and was now charging straight at him. He screamed for Lewis. Lewis ignored the police and sprinted toward Fuller. The officers realized the threat and fired at the truck. Even after emptying their magazines, they couldn't stop it. In a split second, Lewis managed to pry Fuller off the steel rod and pull him to safety, dodging the oncoming truck. When the truck finally stopped, the police opened the door only to find the driver dead. In the back, they discovered Charlotte, who had been kidnapped. Fortunately, she was unharmed. And with that, Joyride came to an end. The sheriff soon identified the truck driver. It turned out he was a frozen goods delivery man, the same trucker who had returned Lewis's credit card that night. Fuller and Lewis realized something was wrong. Just then, the CB radio crackled to life again. A familiar voice came through.
Looking forward to the storm. Keeps everyone inside. Washes everything clean.
And that's where the story ends. So friends, don't prank others recklessly. That's all for today. See you next time.